This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The mayor, district attorney, and police tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by a number of folks talking about the mob attack this past week. First up, Mayor A.C. Ward from the city of Memphis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Jim Harvey, Deputy Chief from the Memphis Police Department. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Amy Wyrick, Shelby County District Attorney General. Thanks for being back.
Of course.
And Bill Dries, Senior Reporter with the Memphis Daily News. When we start, we'll talk big picture and we'll talk small picture on this. But I wanted to start really with your first reaction, Mr. Mayor, when you saw the video. I mean, your first sort of unfettered reaction upon seeing it.
Horror, distress, nothing positive about it whatsoever. There was nothing positive about it. Every negative adjective you can think of, every hurtful adjective you can think of, those were the emotions I felt. And as you know, I've been around a long time. But for any act like that is bad, but when you see young folks perpetrating such an act like that, you say, gee whiz. I was just like any other citizen. It was, where in the world are we going? What's happening?
And your thoughts, when you saw it, just as a person who lives in Memphis and has worked here and so on, your first initial reactions to it?
Well, first, as a parent, I was thinking, you know, how can these kids be out there and their parents not know what they're doing or where they are? I've got a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they don't leave our house without us knowing who they're going to be with and where they are.
Yeah. And District Attorney Wyrick, you were in a position where you can't comment specifically on the case, but I don't know if you can say. I mean, that you're a citizen in the area. I mean, you see the video. Did you have a reaction, and can you comment on that?
Well, of course. I think we all did. And first and foremost, the reaction was, let's get to work and apprehend these individuals and bring them to justice. And thankfully, the Memphis Police Department, working with the Sheriff's Office and our multi-agency gang unit and our office, worked around the clock to make that happen.
Okay. Let's walk through some details of the status of the investigation and what we know is happening. I don't know if I should turn to you maybe for some of this, but as of right now, this is Friday, how many people have been arrested?
I believe we had 11. We got 10 juveniles and 1 adult. He was a 19-year-old.
Do you expect to make further arrests?
Yes, sir. We're still looking, still investigating. We have some parents that have come forward and told us that their children were at the Kroger lot. Those are being investigated, and we'll continue to go out and question people.
Do you feel like you've got the main instigators, or just the first 11 that you got to? I mean,
no, I think we've got the main instigators.
Okay. Okay.
But we are still looking into it to see who else may have been involved and taken an active role in that fight.
And again, just some more details. Various numbers of how many kids were involved, how many young people were involved. Is it 120, or do we have a better number?
We don't have any exact counts. I mean, you'd have to have a camera system that was able to look at the whole lot. Sure. But we're hearing initial reports were 100.
Yeah. Will there be other video? You bring up video. I mean, I've heard people speculate that, I mean, Kroger probably has security video. I mean, all we've seen so far is the handheld camera film, but are there other videos?
Yes, sir. There will be other video.
Will that come out for people to see?
I'm sure it will after the investigations are over.
Have you seen it?
I have not.
Okay. Have you seen other video, or I don't know if you can?
No, I went to the store and just looked out at the camera, but I have not. They were in the process. This was the day after the incident.
Yeah.
They were retrieving it.
Okay.
It had not been retrieved when I was there.
Okay. Just a couple more details. Was it a gang activity? I mean, is it classified as gang activity?
I don't think so. I think it's a group of kids that had been going to CC's, and through social media, they collectively went to CC's to eat, and as teenagers sometimes do, they got out of hand.
Yeah.
And,
there was talk that there was a fight. that there was going to be a fight between two groups of girls, women.
That is my understanding. That that's the way it originated.
And there was a police officer who came to break that up?
Yes, sir.
But then it got out of hand before that police officer could contain the 120 plus people?
I think that what he did was ran them off from the CCs, and he stayed at the CCs and maintained presence.
Okay.
They moved across to the Kroger, and you know, from where his vantage point was, he was unable to see anything else that was going on.
Okay. All right. Bill?
Mayor, this seemed kind of different, at least to my ear, in terms of your reaction, because you went straight to the parents on this and said, okay, if you can do this the easy way or you can do this the hard way. You can help us out on this, and there will be some understanding that we know these things do happen from time to time in terms of your kids saying they're going to be someplace and doing something and then not doing what they said they were going to do. How did that work, and have parents involved in this, not involved in this, but parents of these children, have they responded the way that you had hoped they would respond to this?
Yes, some of them did. As a matter of fact, I have spoken with one parent. I received messages from 3 other parents. I made it clear to them that I cannot get into how the case is going to go, but I can express the wishes of the citizens of the city of Memphis, should, as it moves through the prosecutorial process, and when the judicial officials get ready to make a disposition, if they would ask, what does the mayor feel about it on behalf of the citizens, but I can't get into the actual handling of the case. But the parents did. Some wanted to explain more fully what was going on in the lives of these. But the key thing is I just said, well, thanks for getting your child in, and that's as far as I can go now. So it did accomplish what Director Armstrong and I wanted to get out there, is that don't wait for the police officers to show up to bring your kid. You're looking at that screen. It is just unthinkable that you would sit there and look at your kid and say, well, they might come to get you. If you're any kind of parent at all, and fortunately these individuals knew that, as bad as it may seem, that it was their responsibility to make sure that their children were surrendered to the authorities, and they did.
Mm-hmm. Chief, in terms of the dynamics of a crowd like this, is it possible that this thing takes on a life of its own that probably no one foresaw, much less someone who's 15 or 16 years old?
I think there was a segment of that crowd that was probably the beginnings of the trouble, just regular troublemakers, and that the excitement that grew in the crowd is what spawned that riot.
Go ahead.
Eric, I want to make one thing clear, because the viewers are going to parse every word we say here.
Sure.
And the first thing I want to say from the city of Memphis, that there's just absolutely no excuse, no understanding of knocking a human being down and kicking him or her in the head. That's the key thing. No matter what's going on in your household, there's no way in the world that we can in any way insinuate, imply that, well, you just have to understand, kids will be kids. That is absolutely not the case, and that's going to be the position that the city of Memphis, through its police department, will take. Now, if somewhere, when they get ready to dispose of the case, if some judge wishes to say, I want to look at all the circumstances, then that's a totally different matter.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, to the degree we can, will these kids, we say, be tried in the juvenile court? Will this be handled? Will they be treated as adults? Is that something you can comment on at this point?
Well, we're bound by the law of the state of Tennessee, and to transfer a child from juvenile court to 201 Poplar to be tried as an adult, certain things have to exist. They either have to be a certain age, or they have to have committed a certain list of crimes. So we will take a look at that. I've read the entire file. The police department has delivered everything that they have to our office, and we're poring over that and making those decisions. But bottom line, at the end of the day, whether these cases are disposed of all in juvenile court or some at 201, some at juvenile court, The mission of our office and the responsibility of our office is to not only seek justice for those victims on the parking lot, but for the entire community.
Yeah.
And every case is different. Every one of these juvenile offenders, what they did, their histories, their records, their lack of records, all of that takes a part in the decisions that we make as to how best to handle them.
Two questions for you. One, the idea of a hate crime. People have said this should be a hate crime. This should be looked at as a hate crime. You have said, I think, this is not a hate crime. Define what is and is not a hate crime, and if you can, why this doesn't meet that criteria.
We don't have a hate crime statute in the state of Tennessee. Okay. What we do have is a civil rights intimidation statute, and ironically enough, this week, one of our prosecutors has been trying a civil rights intimidation case where the accusations are someone was posing as a police officer and targeting Hispanics and threatening to have them deported if they didn't do certain things. So you have to have an individual was targeted because of their race, their ethnicity, their national origin, their religion, and a constitutional right that they have was denied. So we don't have a hate crime statute, and the facts of this case, as we know them on Friday morning, September 12th, don't fit.
But do you have enough tools at your disposal, whether or not, so this isn't a hate crime or a civil, but there are plenty to work with in terms of holding these people accountable?
Other statutes,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah, okay.
Of course, yes.
And the second, when you look generally, maybe not specific or not specific to this case, when you look at someone, adult or juvenile, who gets arrested after a horrible crime, a violent crime, and you see that they've had a record and that they've been through the system and that your folks maybe have seen them, does that make you despondent? Does it make you frustrated? Do you just have to accept that that happens? Because I think that's something that people look at is repeat offenders in Memphis, anywhere. Sure. And why didn't we know? We could have seen that this person was going to get more and more violent. Why didn't the justice system do more to keep them behind bars?
Most of the offenders that we dispose of at 201 Poplar are going to serve their sentence out on the street. It's a very small segment of the population of criminal defendants that are actually going to do their time behind bars. The criminal justice sentencing guidelines are written so that's the first thing that the judge looks to. When you're talking about juveniles, it's even more of a focus and a mission of the juvenile courts, which is to not detain, not to hold them in custody, but do what we can while they're out in the community to get them on the right track. Is it frustrating? Of course it is. Tennessee, unfortunately, has one of the highest recidivism rates in the country, but we're working on that locally and on a statewide level to try to get a handle on that.
Okay, Bill.
Mayor, to what degree do you think that the discussion about is this a hate crime or is this not a hate crime, do you think that gets us to the core of this issue, or does it move us away from the core of what happened here?
Bill, unfortunately, I think it moves us away from the core of what happened here. The basic question that we, particularly in city government, have to ask, have we discharged our responsibility to make sure that there's wholesome, supervised activity? We can't all lock our children in the house. Chief Harvey just said his children go out, but he knows where they are. It's just, you don't want your children caged up. Have we done enough to make sure that there are constructive, wholesome outlets for them? We need to search and see if we have done enough on that. We need to search and see if there's a way for us, as someone alluded to earlier, to detect antisocial conduct early and make sure that children, whether they're in the school system or wherever, are dealt with before it gets to the level of a parking lot. Those are the more stubborn issues that we ought to be focusing on. When you take one case, one law, which is what the DA has to do. She doesn't make social policy out there. Then for my part, it allows us to get off the hook to deal with these broader issues. So you're absolutely right. And quite frankly, I haven't practiced law in a long time. I think the statutes that the DA has at her disposal probably would give a more stringent sentence than in other words, focus on the charges that are on the books. If you want to lock somebody up, as the DA just pointed out, the laws are there already.
They're definitely tougher today than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. For 100% service of sentence and for certain classifications of violent offenses are treated much more toughly. So that's a step in the right direction. We also have 2 courtrooms at 201 Poplar and a team of prosecutors that do nothing but handle repeat violent felony offenders to bring that sense of comfort to the community and to send the message that we're not going to tolerate it.
And just to be clear, the charges we're talking about here are aggravated riot.
Yes, which is an E felony, which is so it's punishable from 1 year to 6 years, and aggravated assault, which is a C felony, punishable from 3 to 15 years.
Okay. Again, knowing that obviously this case is still unfolding and there are things you cannot comment on, do you know yet if this will be a case of all are charged as adults or some are charged as adults, some are charged as juveniles?
Yeah, it won't be that easy because we have to look at each offender and what they're charged with, their age, whether it's a crime that even qualifies for us to ask a juvenile court judge to transfer them. It's not just a matter of the community wants them transferred, let's transfer them. There's certain elements that have to be proven, and either their age has to be 16 or over, or if they're under 16, they have to have committed certain enumerated offenses in the statute.
Chief, obviously, again, this is an ongoing investigation, but how much are you hearing about the element of surprise among some of the young folks who were not the troublemakers that your officers have talked to?
I've not heard anything along those lines. I don't know where you're going.
Yeah. And obviously this is a large group of people that we're dealing with here.
One of the parents that called me was just, shocked to the point that she could barely talk with respect to how well the child was doing in school. Had no idea. Again, is that truthful? I don't know, but at least one of the parents has expressed just total shock and surprise.
When you talk about tools and wholesome outlets and so on, people have raised the issue segueing to curfews. Right now, the curfew for teenagers in Memphis is 11:30. What is there a curfew?
Well, it's
Depends on their age.
and the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whether school's in session.
And whether
And
schools
whether
in
schools
session.
that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Does it need to be tightened? Should it be an earlier curfew? Would that help?
Let me speak from the city standpoint because we're reviewing that right now. This was a Saturday night, and I believe for most of these kids it would have been 11 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So the curfew in and of itself would not have prevented this. The key thing we have to ask about the curfews, first of all, are the hours broad enough?
Right.
Because stuff that kids do happens not just at
Because this
night.
was about 9:30 at night, give or take, right? It was before 10 that the first part happened.
It was somewhere between 10,
Okay.
11 o'clock.
Okay, so
The,
a 10 o'clock curfew would have, I don't know, given you guys a little bit more tools. Whether or not that would have stopped it is a whole different debate.
Maybe too, even if you have a curfew, we've got to ask the more serious questions. What do we do with the offenders, violators, once they're picked up? If the curfew's at 10 o'clock, you pick them up at 10:20. Boy, you're going to run the police department, sheriff's department crazy. You'll have to have buses. The question is, what do we do after that? And then we have to be very careful. We have what is called the disproportionate minority contact. And let's just be honest, with the racial demographics the way they are, you're going to have a lot of black and brown kids, and so we're under scrutiny on that. So the bigger question is, if we extend the curfew, begin rigid enforcement, do we really wish to take every kid who's picked up because of a curfew violation and introduce them into the criminal justice or the juvenile justice system? Baltimore did not do that. That's the model we would look at if we come to that.
They did community centers and other alternate activities.
That is correct, at least in the first instances. Now, you can't just keep doing that. Eventually,
Right.
you're going to have to go after the parent.
Right.
If every weekend your child gets
Right.
picked up and taken over to the community center, somebody's
Right.
got to go after the parents on that.
Right. You bring up the racial component, and there's a we'll fumble through this, or I will fumble through this. There's a racial dynamic, at least in the reaction, and forgive me as I again fumble through this, but you look on social media and you look at comments on news sites, and there are a whole lot of people who see that video as this sort of manifestation. A lot of white people, or people prejudiced, or what, this is the manifestation of a lot of fears. An angry mob of, at least on the video, looks like young black men, random violence. Is it fair to look at it through a racial lens? I mean, is race a component in this?
Unfortunately, Eric, in America, and it's not just Memphis, Tennessee, to too much of an extent, everything is still seen through a racial prism. Memphis is no different from that. We cannot escape, and the best way to do it is to hit it head on, and when we see it, do as one of the victims' parents has done and just said, look, violence is wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, whether it's black or white, but let's hit it head on and then go on and start straightening things out. Race is going to be a factor that everybody's going to use as they form their opinions, unfortunately. Well, I said everybody, far too many people, I'll put it that way.
And I say, I present that fear, you know, that you can see people expressing on social media and so on, but, you know, the fact, I think, and maybe I'll turn to one of you two, it's not as if, I mean, this isn't funny, African American people aren't the victim of African American crime. I mean, I think actually it's disproportionately that really, I mean, most crime committed by young African American males, and it's disproportionately high, is committed on other black people. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, those are the numbers that the mayor and I and
Right.
the police department look at on a monthly basis. Our youth violence, 26 and under, that's what drives the crime, and the majority of that is African American young males, and the victims are African American. And we had African American victims on the Kroger parking lot.
Right.
Let's not lose sight of that.
And also we talk about young African American males, but a number of the people arrested are young women.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. And let's go to you for a second. When you talk about that, this disproportionate number of young African American men, and you've been in the district attorney's office one way or another for quite some time now. Do you get jaded? Do you get? Are you able to look at that without a racial lens when you're seeing so many young black men come through and having committed crimes of all sorts? I mean, do you try to be race blind, or how do you?
Oh, of course, because what we're looking, I mean, it's why Lady Liberty is blindfolded. What we're looking at are the actions. What we're looking at is the conduct before us. How does it fit into the law of the state of Tennessee? What do we know about this individual? Have we made attempts to rehabilitate them? If we're going to put them on probation, what kind of programs, what kind of things can we ask the judge to order this individual to do so that we never see them in the system again, regardless of skin color?
Right. Some people had said that, you know, this is a Ferguson moment. I personally don't see that it just seems so different. But for you as a police officer, I don't know how long you've been a police officer in Memphis.
31 years.
31 years. I mean, the police department in Memphis is relatively reflective of the racial balance of the city, I think. I mean, within, you know, pretty close. But do you, 31 years, and you're picking up and arresting a high percentage, just statistically, young black men. Do other officers become jaded, become prejudiced in some way? Do you have fellow officers, I'll assume not yourself, who just begin to view every young black man through this terrible lens?
You know, we, along with the Attorney General's office, try not to be jaded, but there's probably a certain segment that gets jaded.
Yeah.
You do get aggravated with locking somebody up and then seeing them back out on the street the next day after you've locked them up 20 or 30 times. And you know, with state budgets the way they are, there's just not room to house a lot of these people that that are repeat offenders.
Right.
And a lot of that frustration is why we're looking to other ways to address some of the issues. The gang injunction that was issued in the Riverside area, without any officer having to put handcuffs on anybody, we've brought peace to a war-torn segment of our city, working with the mayor's office, and it was the first time that statute's ever been used in Memphis, Tennessee, and knock on wood, it's worked beautifully. Nobody was arrested, but the message was sent to those that were wreaking havoc and scaring the good folks of the Riverside area. You're not wanted here. Take it somewhere else, dispense of your gang activity, and it's empowered that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And this is why we try to give officers and the kids on the street an opportunity to see each other in different circumstances. We've started keeping our community centers open on weekends. They get to see officers there. Sometimes the officers out there shooting ball with them. To keep the officers from getting jaded, I mean, there are tens of thousands of kids out there who are doing the right thing, and it's refreshing to the officer to see that. It's also refreshing to the child to learn that police do more than just come in and pick up black kids and haul them downtown. We've got to do more of that, and we're doing more of that.
We just have a couple minutes left. You've spoken a little bit this week. I mean, this hits that kind of self-doubt that Memphis can have, or the stereotypical criticisms that Memphis is violent, or Memphis. Your message to people from outside Memphis who you can go on social media and say it, and say, this is what happens in Memphis every day. This is what's going on in Memphis. Your message to them about what is going on in Memphis.
The good that's going on in Memphis far outweighs the bad. It's just that the bad, for understandable reason, gets the coverage of headlines. It's much more intriguing. I always say, don't judge our city on the first 10 to 12 minutes of the 10 o'clock news. In this very week, you had the Secretary of Education, and when you go and see his picture, looking at the little kids at Cornerstone Prep who are introducing him, and then the day before that, we had a fellow from the White House who's here talking about education. All of these things that are going on. The good far outweighs the bad, and
right.
That's just the message we're trying to pump out.
Real quick, is Memphis a safe place to live?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it is.
And you?
It's
31
a-
years? Is it a
it's a-
safe place to live?
It's a fun place to live and to play.
And let me tell you, if you look at some of
Last-
the numbers in Nashville,
Yeah.
I think one thing that hurts us is we're far more honest in reporting what happens. If it's bad, we report it.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.